Welcome to Building Tomorrow, a show about how tech and innovation are making the world a better place. I'm your host, Paul Matzko, and I'm joined in the studio by Will Duffield and first-time guest host Natalie Dowzicky, whose many responsibilities at libertarianism.org include making sure that these episodes go out on time. True confession, this would all fall apart without Natalie. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Now, today we're going to talk about the future of pet ownership, along with some kind of cool new gadgets, new trends. We're going to get into pet cloning, all of which reflect the changing relationships of owners and their animals. Now, I own a great big greyhound, but he's not nearly as famous as your roommate's pet, Natalie. It's like a Pomeranian, a Shih Tzu, a fox rat hybrid. What is it?
She's a Corgi.
A Corgi. Okay.
and her name's Pippa. So she's 6 months old this week, actually. And before my roommate had ever adopted, before she came to our apartment, my roommate created an Instagram for her from the very first photo that the breeder sent us. She's from a breeder in Iowa that only breeds Corgis. And for the first month or so of her life, since we were worried about leaving her at home during the work hours, she actually went to work with my roommate. My roommate works in a senator's office on Capitol Hill, where she grew her fan base. So it's actually pretty common for pets to come in, dogs for that matter, to come in on Mondays and Fridays when the Senate isn't in session for workers. But she came in, she was lucky enough to come in for that whole month. So she got a lot of attention.
I saw it kind of trotting around the halls of Congress in some pictures.
So she got featured in a roll call, a roll call page, as well as a video. And my roommate has this goal to get Pippa to have a picture with each senator on her Instagram account.
So she's already better known than every other intern on Capitol Hill, basically.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So she has 900 followers or something on Instagram, something like that.
Around there. Yeah.
So this actually, I think, brings us to this new trend that we've seen for people. There are people on Instagram influencers who have large fan bases that will recommend, they're kind of sponsors for products, and often fashion, clothing, and cosmetics, right? So, do you like my smoky eye? Well, it's because of Maybelline, or I think they're a cosmetic company.
They're a cosmetic company.
They're a cosmetic company. Then buy Maybelline, right? But we're seeing this blend over into the world of pet ownership, right? Aren't there pet Instagram influencers or something? Right.
So since we have Pippa on Instagram, my suggested searches have now all been dog Instagrams rather than people ones. And some dogs have up to 20 or 30,000 followers, and they run ads all day long. They'll do videos, and people will be it seems like they have a pretty loyal fan base. They'll be checking in, looking for different challenges certain dogs do, or if her dog gets that type of bone and loves it, my dog should have it too. So there's definitely a strong.
Does the monetization element function similarly to other sorts of Instagram influencer advertising schemes?
Yeah, so it's pretty similar because we were joking that we want to get Pippa enough followers so that she can start contributing rent to the apartment. But I think it probably starts out your lower level. You get the product for free to advertise it, but then to a certain degree, it has the same advertising scheme.
Are you guys there yet?
No.
Getting free products?
Not yet.
So
cross my fingers.
The real technical legal question, right, is if she appears in a photograph with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that's going to boost her follower count. But then also, AOC gets a cute Corgi in her Instagram feed, which is worth some follow. Is that an in-kind contribution from Pippa?
I don't know.
To the senator?
We should look into it. I know there have been some senators that have posted a picture of them with Pippa on their Facebook and stuff.
Smart.
So,
yeah. In this day of party polarization,
it's bipartisan in action.
No.
Will can't take it. He's retching over there. So it's interesting in part because I think we see this reflected in the idea of pets on social media. That's been something it's something of a joke now that if you're on Facebook, as soon as someone has a kid, their profile picture becomes a picture of the kid, and you never see a picture of that person again. It'll be you have to go back years to find a profile picture of the person and not their kid. In a sense, you can kind of see this being mirrored in the social media realm for pets. I mean, we're kind of treating that pet in a sense like a kid. And maybe we don't have
It pushes it over more towards consumption good rather than companion.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I mean, that's how I view it.
Yeah, flesh that out some. Yeah.
Well, when the pet is there to be shown off on Instagram, and particularly the pets of influencers who are already quite famous to begin with, it can often seem as though the pet is simply another accessory, just like the Ferrari they're showing off.
Especially if you can literally shove it in your handbag, right? One of the little ones. It's an accessory for your accessory. And now this gets to something that has happened. I mean, we can talk some here about how reliable these statistics are, but there does appear to have been an increase in the pet ownership rate here in the United States from like the mid 50s, something like 50% of American households a generation ago owned pets. Now it's about 68%, so over 2/3 of households. And that is despite some other trends that we'd expect to run contrary to that, which is that the home ownership rate has declined since the financial recession, and yet the pet ownership rate has gone up slightly. And usually people buy pets once they get houses. I mean, back when I rented, I could never own a pet because
Well, I think it's important to think about what kind of pet we have in mind here. Are we talking dogs or having a beta fish? One of those is more home ownership contingent than the other.
I still think the number of fish is actually higher than that of cats or dogs, if I remember the statistics.
It's all the college kids that get fish.
Yeah, they get fish and then kill them. So I guess if you get to count each fish that if you kill a dozen in a year because you forget to feed them, that really boosts
people
the
take good care of their fish. But you also, in terms of stats, very few people have 30 dogs. People with an aquarium have many fish.
That's a good point. Though I think it's a percentage of households. So we own more pets, or a higher percentage of people own pets, to put it that way, than ever before. We also spend more on pets than ever before. The number I saw was in 2017, $86 billion in pet products with a growth rate of 5%, which is like when you look at inflation charts, and libertarians, we love to point out these inflation charts where like, look, things that the market provides get cheaper over time, and things that the state provides, like the cost of education or healthcare, have a high growth rate in the cost. Well, this is a market that's growing about as rapidly as the inflation rate for education, right?
What percentage of that do you think is regulatory compliance driven?
What do you mean?
Over the past 30 years or so, it's become much more regulatorily intensive to own a dog or a cat, maybe not a fish, but the requirements that it be locally registered, up to date with its shots, spayed and neutered, chipped potentially. These are all pretty costly.
In an apartment too, there's monthly pet fees. There's usually deposit fees, that kind of stuff.
But I guess we can consider that regulation of a sort. Yeah, but the private governance of pets or pet ownership.
It's interesting. You think you could measure whether
parsing out like medical cost versus, and obviously the more when we see the insurance rate for the number of pets insured going up, there's a care element there, but it's also the fact that because the pet has become more expensive, it's now a better move to insure it.
Yeah, you would think you could measure like the upfront capital costs going up because of, say, mandatory chipping or other fees, or like a municipality that requires spaying and neutering before adoption. That.
I believe in New Jersey they were talking about increasing the gun license fee. And one of the politicians saying that, it's ridiculous. It now costs more to register a dog than a gun. I agree that it's ridiculous, but we ought to lower the cost of registering a dog, not bring guns up to parity.
That's become the new measure for everything. Like, is it expensive? Well, it costs less than registering a dog. Therefore, but we're spending more for whatever reason. I mean, I suspect some combination of upfront capital costs being higher, but then also people seem to be spending more on just consumer goods, toys and things like that. We can actually talk about some of those goods. Like I think you guys have a Furbo.
Yeah, so we have a Furbo. They're like, I believe is on Shark Tank, or a version of it was on Shark Tank. It's essentially, I mean, what it is a baby monitor that can shoot out treats to the dog. So the camera is like right outside Pippa's crate, and it has a sensor for noise and motion. So if she barks, my roommate will get a notification on her phone at work that says, like, your dog is currently barking, which, like, if you think about it, could be kind of sad if you can't go home and console the puppy. And then also it has an option to like shoot out treats to Pippa, just like make her happy. So it's very similar to like a baby monitor in this sense, except, I mean, you're leaving the dog there during work all day rather than it's just sleeping at night.
I totally
providing food through it.
Yeah.
I mean,
it shoots out treats.
I can't help but wonder how the dog conceives of such a thing, especially over time. And when it's a puppy, does it begin, if it's spending 8 hours with that thing while you're at work and seeing you after work, is it imprinting more on the machine than you? And particularly as these things become more advanced. You wonder about it with dog walkers, just in a human to human social comparison, but this really ups the ante.
Well, even for dog walkers, there's tons of apps now. There's Wag, Rover, where you can like just go on, like you can, I think it's as simple as like you get a background check and then suddenly you're a expert dog walker and you can walk, someone can just like pick you on the app and you can go walk their dog at lunchtime.
Yeah. I like the idea that here's a pitch for a movie script. Millennia from now, they'll realize the first stirrings of our future canine overlords came because they invested Furbos with religious zeal. They started to think of them as like a godlike figure that they had to worship at the altar of to get treats. No, I would probably I would pay some large sum of money for a device that allowed me to like remotely shoot treats at my toddler. I mean, and it's interesting the connection you made to.
We can build it.
I mean, that literally
that's
exists.
in our weekend Arduino project.
It is possible. Is that tie between baby monitors and dog monitors? And you can also, like a lot of daycares now have monitoring systems where you can watch your kid. They'll send you notifications when the kid cries or when it poops or when it snaps or whatever, right? And that sense of we are starting to invest both resources but also emotional energy in our pets, like we think of as investing in kids, in a way that I think would have been kind of alien even a generation ago. Like even when the pet ownership rate was still quite high, people didn't necessarily think of pets in this as members of the family in quite the same way they do now. And you can see that by we spend more on their health care. We're like insurance rates were almost zero except for like show dogs 10 years ago. Now they're 10% of animals.
I think there's some of that on the member of the family. Mm-hmm. There's also an identitarian element vis-a-vis the dog owner. And I think of this more with regard to single dog owners, but might apply more broadly that, it's easier to become, and there's more of a script for being a dog person and really organizing your life in a sense around your dog and going either to the dog park or urban activities that are coming back, like ratting. You take your dog
really
out and go ratting. Yeah.
I mean, there was a happy hour at a bar not far from us recently. It was like, bring your dog and like show off its long hair. It was like long hair dog day at the bar.
And somebody out there is like a calendar of all of those bar events throughout the week.
Yeah. I did not think about that.
I don't know whether it's just a sort of we place greater onus on individually chosen identities. And that's something that you can be now.
I mean, there is this is, Robert Putnam's article, the Bowling Alone thesis, right? That declining sociability in the real world, fewer people bowling in bowling leagues. And so people have this sense of like anomie, rootlessness, a lack of belonging. So they find new ways of forming community around, those bonds used to be formed around, I don't know, church attendance or neighborhood, literally growing up in the same neighborhood and living there your whole life, or bowling leagues or the union or whatever. But now we can select our own identities and we're moving around constantly. So let's make it about dog ownership
And you can become part of an international community of enthusiasts for your dog breed. I can find a subreddit just for Nova Scotia duck-tolling retrievers.
Is that your dog, Will?
I don't have one, but I'd really like one. They're lovely
the future.
dogs.
Future. Well, and then once you get the Nova Scotia duck
Tolling.
tolling,
They run
Retriever.
about back and forth on beaches.
it's a
Their
retriever.
tails flash about, and
So a dog.
a dog,
it brings birds in. That's
Yeah.
the tolling motion being described.
Once you have that dog, you can then use Dig, which is the dog person's dating app, to select only people who also have Nova Scotia tolling retrievers. And right, I mean that's the ultimate next step. If you've selected your identity,
Oh yeah,
you're
from
going
that
to
perspective, yes.
right, where we're literally going to make our biological imperative finding other people who also share that identity.
Oh, that gets even weirder than with cats, because you're finding someone who also has toxoplasmosis.
Oh yeah, we're all infected, right?
Yeah. So you need someone else with the same cat-borne brain parasites as you, so you can take care of cats together.
Will, do you think you'll refer to yourself as a dog dad?
No, I'd really. Why?
Are you a momager?
I don't think
No.
that's a
No.
healthy sense of identity.
But it is one, right? I mean, that's what's interesting
It
about all
is.
this is the extent to which people are investing that kind of amount of their self, of their
Yes.
identity, of obviously their finances and everything that goes along with that in their pets. And that's not, I mean, I'm agnostic about whether that's a good or a bad thing. It's just, it's a thing, right?
Yeah, and there was a kind of tragic case. I'm from Chester County, Pennsylvania. It's an area in flux, going from rural farm community to developments. And someone from the development side let their dogs run. They were allegedly harassing someone's sheep. The farmer shot the dog. And the question was whether the family who owned the dog ought to be compensated as though a member of their family had been harmed.
Oh, yeah.
You know, damages based on the emotional impact of having this dog taken from you,
Right.
or as livestock.
Yeah.
Because from the farmer's perspective, someone else's livestock are killing his livestock, and that's an issue.
Yeah.
And
Because if the sheep
on
gets
the other
killed,
side, it's the part of your family has been taken away from you, and it just speaks to that difference in conception of pets between an older world and.
So I guess teacup pigs make it a little bit
that does get
hazy,
complicated,
right?
Right. You can eat it, but you might not yet. Yeah.
And it would be technically farm animal.
It is. Pigs, we raise
Yeah.
them and eat them, right? And there's not a lot of, well, there are puppy farms, puppy mills, but not for consumption here. I think the first time I kind of thought about this distinction, like how different that was from the old world, kind of quite literally, there was this book by a historian named Robert Darnton called The Great Cat Massacre. If you ever go to history grad school, you'll read it at some point. But it's all about, there were these apprentices in medieval Paris and working for a printer, as I recall, or I think it was a printer. And they were mistreated by their master, by the printer. And they, but the master had a favorite cat. And they felt like the cat was treated better than they were. And so they basically ended up tricking the master. They pretended to be cats at night, caterwauling to keep the master up. And eventually the master got frustrated and said, take care of the problem. So the apprentices then went and rounded up hundreds of cats and tortured and slaughtered them all in kind of a festival. It was a very merry kind of scene. And Darnton uses that to illustrate this idea of that, a couple of things. He's interested in doing some other work with that. But what's interesting from a pet ownership perspective is that well, is first of all the casual cruelty. Like if you did that now, that would be horrifying. But at the time, it was
terrible
bear
baiting,
yeah,
goose
dog
pulling,
cockfighting. So like that's not that surprising of a lesson. But the other thing here was that essentially what's going on, you have this new category of the bourgeoisie. You have people like printers who there's something different, and this is early Middle Ages, or like 14th century, and so we're seeing the first stirrings of like an urban bourgeoisie who own capital, who are entrepreneurs, who run businesses, and you have people who are on the outside of that looking in. And what do they fixate their resentment on? The fact that they treat animals better than people. The concept of pets was angering to them. And so that's where the backlash went. They directed it towards these things that were not just animals, they're being treated like people. So it's something different. I mean, I think this is part of our modern, bourgeois capitalist society, is that we have both the financial luxury and the emotional energy to invest that significance. I think
we still do look askance at juxtapositions of pets being treated like people and people being treated like beasts of burden. The skepticism that accompanies Middle Eastern princes who rely upon effectively slave labor from Southeast Asia with pet tigers that have their own chefs. And we see that as, at the very least, déclassé, if not something worse.
That's true.
Well, it's also interesting because in like today's world, isn't it a bit like, okay, so if I'm a younger millennial and I want to have ownership over something other than myself, and I'm not looking to have children right now, I'm going to get a pet. So I go adopt a pet specifically because it's not a human and I don't want the risk and costs that come with that. But then I treat it like a human.
Right.
Which is like a little bit of a paradox in terms of like, that's not what we intended when we went to go adopt a pet. Was to take care of a human.
Is that is it the child that the pet is replacing?
Well, there was that one article on here where they talked about 44% of millennials will say that when they own a pet, they think of it as a starter child. It's like a trial run, a guinea pig. You can figure things out before you have the kid.
It's not as risky.
It's not as risky. It's like liminal.
If you look at when people are getting these pets really before they would even likely be having a child, but not before they'd be getting married. And in this, it's Institute for Family Studies piece by Lyman Stone, he argues that pets are more a replacement for spouses amongst young people today.
That's interesting, yeah.
I'll quote him here. Pets are often described as providing companionship, emotional support, security, or a sense of home or rootedness for pet parents. But these aren't traits that describe a child. These are traits that describe a husband or wife. With my generation postponing the commitment of marriage due to any number of other reasons, the need for a reliable companion who is committed to stay until death do it part may simply be transferred onto pets rather than people.
I can see that.
I would tend to that, especially if you look at how, especially the juxtaposition of pets and breakups. And your boyfriend or girlfriend leaves you, but at least you still have your dog. Or in the worst case scenario,
you have a custody battle. That's become a big deal.
All the old country songs. She left me and she took my dog.
Yeah. So, I mean, whether we think of, it's part of the family, whether it's a spousal substitute or in a sense a kid substitute, there's something going on there where we're investing them with like familial energy. And a lot of that is, as they pointed out in the article.
Families are getting smaller today.
Yeah. We have fewer children than ever before.
And have fewer cousins and extended families. So it may just be, I can build out my circle a little bit with this dog.
Once upon a time, you would, my parents tell stories of growing up, going to family reunions once a year, every year, meeting hundreds of random second cousins. Who has a family that large anymore, right? It's getting rare. I do. Well,
but it compounds with each generation. It gets smaller. You have a smaller extended crop.
Like my grandparents, they met. They were not of blood, but it was like there was a remove. They were like in-laws of a second cousin. Right? Like it was literally so much of your social circle. That's how you met potential spouses. It was clan, right? We've got the clan is shrinking. So if you want to be a spouse, add someone to your family, a dog, and then meet someone else who also likes dogs and shares the various virtues you invest in being a dog owner. Like if you're a dog owner, you must be more responsible than non-dog owners. What people, in fact,
It's all signaling.
It's signaling, right? And it's a kind of interestingly, we just did this Green New Deal episode last week, but I was thinking about this. It's kind of an opposite signal among a certain set of folks our age. I've had friends who won't have children because they think it's environmentally irresponsible. That people are
that's ridiculous.
Well,
People had children during the plagues. I have no time for that sentiment.
Well, not irresponsible for the kid. There are some who do that, but others who think it's because each person is a net loss for the planet's environment. It's irresponsible for the sake of the planet.
That's even stupid.
Right. Well, I don't agree with it, but yet they wouldn't say the same thing. Those same folks are some of the most ardently pro-pet, like pet rights, rescue dogs. The same logic applies. Every pet you add is actually a net drain on the global environment. But one signals warm and cuddly things. One signals the opposite way.
Understanding pets as natural in a sense, as of the earth in a way that they are not.
Yeah, it's kind of something.
I don't know.
there.
That seems like one plausible way of getting there, but
yeah.
it requires
It's a bit of a stretch.
a pretty strict, like, human-animal divide.
Yeah, it's true. Well, and to give ourselves a break here, we face a situation which having a kid is incredibly. It's always been hard for everybody to have children. I mean, throughout human history, but we're at the point now where it is drastically expensive. The cost of having a child, of finding childcare.
Yeah, to have a kid in a socially acceptable fashion.
Yeah.
seems difficult.
Like my understanding is the cost of one kid today is equivalent to the cost of having like 2 or 3 kids a generation ago, in terms of the total share of familial wealth.
Well, they can't do labor for you anymore either.
That's right. Yeah, you have to go back 2 generations for that for us.
And also a dog doesn't come with a college tuition price tag.
That's true.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's...
Just got puppy school. That's it.
And not even college tuition, daycare. I mean,
Exactly.
you look at what people, especially in urban settings, are paying for daycare these
There
days.
is doggy day camp, though. That is
There
a thing.
is, however, if you don't send your dog to doggy day camp, I doubt your circle of friends are going to judge you to the same extent as if you decide to homeschool your kids or not send them to daycare or whatever. Yeah.
I think what I want to push back against here a bit is that some of the articles that we read, like there was this National Catholic Register one, I saw a Federalist article, which observed all the same data we've been talking about, rising dog ownership, more and more millennials, yada, 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 kid substitutes. And we're very, I think the technical term is judgy, very judgy about it. And to me, it's a unintended function of broader social changes.
Yeah, they're judging an effect, not a cause.
Right. We're getting married later. We're having kids later. It's more expensive to have them. If you can get...
And those are all issues, but targeting dogs isn't going
right.
to fix any of it.
Yeah, right. You're going after a symptom, not a root cause. And if you can get 10% of the pleasure of having a kid out of having a pet, you can do it for 90% less. So right, I don't blame
that.
folks
Is
who,
just a disgust impulse. You see a dog in a child's pram, effectively going down the street, and there's something that strikes you as just wrong about this.
Yeah. Cultural norms.
You should be caring for a child with that, not babying this animal.
Right. But I
feel that.
We're not the most conservative lot here, so I think our disgust muscles are weak compared to folks at the National Catholic Register. Now, pushing this forward, okay, so a little future vision here. I'm interested in so all the trends we've talked about, declining birth rates, delayed marriage, delayed childbearing, those are things that are accelerating, right? They're going to become true. They're true in the U.S., and they're going to become more true here and more true of more of the rest of the world over time. I mean, I'm actually trying to get an interview with authors of this book about global population decline, but they basically say by 2050, net global population will start to decrease. And we're all going to end up looking like Japan, where there are far more pets. Even though the pet ownership rate is lower in Japan than in the US, it's like a quarter of households. They are significantly more pets in Japan than there are children. And that's our future, this aging, graying population with relatively few children, each generation being smaller than the last.
So, I don't want to accept that future, but okay.
Well, but it's already true of us. If you take out in-migration, the native-born U.S. population is below replacement rate.
I know. I don't want to accept this as a fixed future that we are doomed to, because if that is our future, we are doomed.
It's kind of depressing. I mean, yeah.
Point there isn't a next generation.
So you should get an emotional support dog.
So in the face of this existential nihilism, get a pet. No, that's a depressing way of taking it.
But taking current pet trends into the future and bringing some sci-fi in, some how people have thought about how folks will relate to pets in the future. You do see a sort of fixation on the pets as a status symbol, consumption good paradigm, taken in some of William Gibson's books to the point of wealthy folks bringing back extinct animals to serve as vanity pets. In one case, a thylacine or Tasmanian devil, which, when you think about it, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But also
looks
exactly what's better than having a tiger? Having cloned an extinct tiger. You're now cooler than the guy with the tiger and higher status, or a woolly mammoth at the end of that train.
And this prospect is closer than some of our listeners might think. I mean, you actually had this article about someone who was cloning and cloning their pet, and there's a lawsuit that's come out.
People do clone
that's become common,
pets.
Right?
In this case, someone had what was the smallest dog in the world for a while, Chihuahua named Miracle Millie. And they wanted to clone this dog so they could have more of them in the future, maybe sell some, whatever. They contract with a South Korean cloning firm, get their 10 Miracle Millies, and then they find out that there are 39 other Miracle Millies out there. And the firm has allegedly, we'll see how this goes. The suit's just been filed in a federal court in Florida. But that they breached contract. They made a bunch of extra dogs and then gave them to other third parties. And that in a sense that the pet's DNA, its genetic makeup, which the owner sees as their property, has been stolen from them by this firm that contracted to just clone a couple dogs.
And while right now I think it still costs quite a lot to do this, like 6 figures, the cost has been falling. I mean, there'll come a point in time where for $5,000 you can get your dead pet cloned and you can have Pippa Mark II.
It's very silly. Don't do it. It won't be like the dog you know and love.
Yeah, it turns out, DNA, genetic determinism is not, nature, nurture.
There are lots of differences even within a litter.
Yeah. So, but people are going to do it because it's going to remind them, it's going to look like their old dog. And so people are going to do it. And I would expect, though, that what we just talked about in the U.S. is people delaying marriage, delaying childbearing, and filling that chronological gap and that kind of need for companionship with pets. In a sense, we're talking about a future, even if it's only medium term and not long term, a decline. We'll go for the most hopeful possible vision, free will. There's going to be a time where, as there are fewer children born in the society, in a sense, there is more of that gap, that yearning for companionship and longing. I would expect pet ownership rates, the rates themselves, the spending on pets, cloning of pets, all of this is going to continue to rise. And it's going to be something that I think in 50 years, people will look back at now and previous generations we're going to be the weird ones. We're going to be like the bear baiters. Like you mean that you were alive when like 1% of pets had pet insurance? What kind of inhumane policy is that you didn't have universal insurance for pets, right? Like that kind of conversation is going to become possible in the future. They're also on this front. Oh, I did want to touch on robots. Robots as pet substitutes. So this is where Japan comes in, because you get all this toy market innovation that's kind of like pet replacement. Have you seen those little the dog ones? Aibo? Yeah, they relaunched them. They're like robot dogs you can have. In Europe, there's they're called Peros. They're like little fluffy seals that you give to senile old people for companionship, for comfort. And so it's filling that same niche, right?
It is interesting the extent to which people seem to bond with them, because you had, even after official support was discontinued from Sony, sort of third-party techno vets who stepped up to keep these dogs alive. And eventually, they even had Shinto funerals for them.
When you say keep these dogs alive, does that mean like plug them in to charge, or what do you mean?
Or replace components that have worn out,
the
which
motherboard.
would otherwise
because even saying it's alive is giving a human.
Well, I'm buying into their conceit there, but if they're willing to take these steps and in the end have a funeral for the thing, they certainly see it as having some transcendent value, or being deserving of that respect.
Well, and here we get to this. I mean, you can imagine. So we recognize robots are not actually alive, and there's all kinds of studies which show that initially there's this kind of uncanny valley treatment of robots, that people are either attracted to them because they look kind of lifelike or weirded out by them. But eventually it becomes routinized, and we stop. That effect stops, right? But imagine if we could actually make them kind of alive, which is make them intelligent. So imagine a robot pet that has an artificial intelligence in it, which means it learns, evolves, and grows. It has a unique personality from other robot pets. It conforms to your interests. It reads you, learns you, figures out how to better comfort you. Like, it's a logical application of AI technology and personal robot as pet replacement technology.
You'll see all sorts of blurry products that sit between traditional social categories.
Okay.
Looking to Japan again and other places in Southeast Asia, these digital boyfriend apps seem pretty popular. And there's a man in your phone who you need to keep happy and go on dates with, and he says nice things about your appearance and all of that. But
next episode we make Natalie
there's a romantic aspect as well, but it's also a physical gadget. And obviously the idea of combining physical gadget and pet and romance at the moment, kind of cringy, but we don't know the ways in which we may blur these categories going forward.
Also, the quality of being a pet Instagram follower myself, the quality of Instagrams for dogs, if they're robots, I think will decline, because a lot of the pets I follow on Instagram are funny to follow because they do funny or stupid things, and they look get all excited and they'll bump their head against the wall or something like that, and that's cute. But if a robot is just processing and not necessarily doing the cute things that make dogs have personalities, then
right,
it's going to be
I think
decline for.
We tend to anthropomorphize. What was it? Jibo, one of those home assistant robots this week, was being spun down. Like, the server clusters had all been sold off and the thing wasn't going to be able to work anymore. And it gave a "I'm sorry, I'm dying soon" dance, which had people in tears.
Yeah.
So they
even though we know that's programming, right? Yeah. Well, or the what was it? The Mars rover, right? I'm cold. It's getting dark.
Well, people saying, well, we need to go to Mars so we can get the rover back, so we can give it a proper burial. And it's, you're getting ahead of yourself there completely. But it is interesting that that's what inspires some people to to take the path to Mars. Like, we need to pick up our anthropomorphized companion and help him out.
Yeah.
Not so much the future of humanity, but
No.
driven by this emotive connection that we've created to something we built.
Yeah. Though, and I think in the rover case, someone pointed out that phrase that got repeated and went viral was a journalist waxing rhapsodically.
Isn't that a
about
Hal reference? They're like, it's getting dark?
Yeah, I think it was that part of the Hal reference. They just kind
throwing
of
that in.
They were. I mean, the thing sent back a signal saying can't sense sun, running out of energy, and they made it more poetic sounding and referenced. Yeah, but that shows the power. We wanted that thing to be alive. It's not alive. It's a robot, right? It does not have feelings or personality.
And at the same time, if we actually felt it was alive and sent it to Mars to wander around until it's died, that would be terrible. We wouldn't be comfortable with that, or ought not.
We did it with Matt Damon, and he ended up okay. So.
Yeah, the point wasn't to send him there one way.
That's good. Well, this has been fun, guys. Thanks for joining us, Natalie. Thanks again, Will. And until next week, be well. Thanks for listening. Building Tomorrow is produced by Tess Terrible. If you enjoy Building Tomorrow, please subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about libertarianism, find us on the web at www.libertarianism.org.